Your legs tend to weaken first, and today I want to walk you through 6 foods that the research links to stronger legs and better muscle in older adults, and, more to the point, why each one actually does something inside the body. Quick word before we start. I am not a doctor. I am a retired biochemist who reads this literature most mornings because I find it genuinely fascinating. So nothing here is medical advice, and anything that matters to you belongs in front of your own physician. Here is a fact worth sitting with for a moment. A study in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society found that older adults with real lower body weakness carried a substantially higher risk of mobility problems over the following years, along with more falls, more hospital admissions, and worse outcomes overall. And here is the thing most people get wrong about that. Your legs are not simply getting weaker because you are getting older. In large part, they are getting weaker because nobody ever told you how to feed them. And those are 2 very different situations. One is a sentence you are stuck with. The other is a problem with a solution. The solution rests on a piece of biology called anabolic resistance, and once you understand it, the whole list makes sense. Let me explain it plainly. Anabolic resistance is the reduced ability of older muscle to respond to the signals that tell it to build and repair. In younger years, a modest amount of protein or a little exercise flips the muscle building switch easily. Later on, that same switch has grown stiff. It still works, but it needs a firmer push. The muscle is not lazy, and it is not finished. It simply needs a louder signal, and several of the foods on this list are, in effect, ways of turning up the volume on that signal so the message gets through. I will say a word about the title too, because it says fast, and I want to be straight with you rather than sell you a miracle. The studies here run over weeks and months, not days. Muscle genuinely does respond in later life. That part is real and encouraging, but it responds to consistency, not to a single heroic week. So think of these 6 as the raw materials you hand your body day after day, not as a magic trick. Before we begin, tell me in the comments how old you are and whether your legs have been feeling weaker, heavier, or less steady than they used to, going up the stairs, getting out of a chair, that little hesitation before you trust them. I read the comments, and your story often turns out to be the one that helps a stranger further down the page. And do stay to the end, because the number 1 food is one that millions of older people were actively told to avoid, on the strength of advice that the research has since turned on its head. We are counting down from 6 to 1, from useful to genuinely transformative. And a word before we start counting. Nothing on this list is a substitute for using the legs you have. Food supplies the raw materials, but muscle is built by being asked to work, so the very best results in every study I have read came when people paired better eating with a little regular movement, a walk, some gentle resistance, standing up from a chair a few extra times a day. Think of the food and the movement as 2 hands doing the same job. Feed the muscle and then give it a reason to use what you fed it, and the 2 together do far more than either could alone. Number 6, eggs. I know the egg has been argued over your entire adult life. They will raise your cholesterol, put them down, walk away. And for older adults in particular, that was one of the more unfortunate pieces of nutrition advice ever widely repeated. Because here is what the egg actually does for aging legs. It is one of the richest sources on the planet of an amino acid called leucine. Now, leucine is worth knowing by name because it is the key that starts the engine of muscle protein synthesis, the actual biological process by which your body builds and mends muscle tissue. And remember that anabolic resistance we talked about. Older muscle needs a good hit of leucine to get the engine to turn over at all. Research from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign found that the leucine in a couple of whole eggs was enough to meaningfully stimulate muscle building, even in older adults with real anabolic resistance. But the egg has more to give than leucine, and it is hiding in the part people were told to throw away. The yolk carries choline, vitamin D, and a compound called phosphatidylcholine that helps keep the membranes of your muscle cells intact. And those membranes grow more fragile with age, less able to hold on to what the muscle needs to contract and recover. Discarding the yolk, as one researcher more or less put it, is like buying the car and leaving the engine at the dealership. A woman wrote into the channel about her mother, 74, from Florida, who had been on a strict low-fat plan for over a decade and avoided eggs completely on the advice of an older doctor. After her second fall in 6 months, she had become frightened of her own staircase. The family added whole eggs back to her mornings, and some weeks later, the daughter wrote to say her mother had walked up the stairs without holding the railing for the first time in 2 years. I cannot promise you that, and I would not try to. But it lines up neatly with what the leucine research keeps showing. The synergy tip here, for what it is worth, is to eat your eggs with a little healthy fat, some olive oil or avocado, because it helps you absorb the fat-soluble vitamins in the yolk, and to cook them gently rather than frying them hard in a dry pan. Number 5. Salmon. And this one is about putting out a fire. If your legs ache when you wake, if they cramp at night, if they feel heavy in the mornings, part of the story is very often chronic low-grade inflammation working away at the muscle tissue while you sleep. Picture it as a small fire that never quite goes out, burning at a low level year after year, charring the muscle fibers, the connective tissue, and the nerve pathways that carry the signal from your brain down to your legs, telling them to move. The omega-3 fats in oily fish, the ones called EPA and DHA, are among the best studied ways we have to damp that fire down. They do not just soothe it, they chemically interfere with the inflammatory compounds, the prostaglandins and cytokines that the body makes in growing amounts after 60. A study from the University of Aberdeen in Scotland followed older adults over about 18 weeks and found that the group getting omega-3s, roughly the equivalent of a few servings of salmon a week, showed a higher rate of muscle protein synthesis than the group that did not. That is a fish doing the work, not a drug. And salmon carries a second gift that almost nobody mentions, vitamin D, and specifically the active form your skin makes less and less efficiently as you pass 70. Research in the field of clinical endocrinology has tied vitamin D deficiency, which is genuinely common in older adults, to muscle weakness, poor balance, and a higher risk of sarcopenia, the medical term for age-related muscle loss. And a single good serving of wild salmon can carry more vitamin D than a whole day's recommended minimum for an older adult. Wild-caught matters here, and it is not snobbery. Farmed salmon has a very different balance of fats and does not carry the same anti-inflammatory benefit. So oily fish, wild where you can manage it, 2 or 3 times a week, is the pattern the research keeps rewarding. The synergy tip, pair it with a handful of dark leafy greens, which brings us neatly to number 4. Number 4. Spinach and dark leafy greens, and this one has almost a mythical reputation among longevity researchers, for a reason grounded in real biology. Think of every older person you have known who moved with grace, who rose from a chair without pushing off the arms, who walked without shuffling. I would wager greens were somewhere in their diet. Here is why. After about 75, the body loses a good part of its ability to recycle a molecule called nitric oxide, which acts like a traffic controller for the blood flowing into your legs. When nitric oxide falls, the tiny vessels feeding your quadriceps, your hamstrings, your calves begin to congest. Nutrients struggle to get in, waste struggles to get out, and the result is muscle that tires faster, recovers slower, and shrinks year by year. Leafy greens, spinach and kale and chard and rocket are loaded with dietary nitrate, which your body converts back into nitric oxide, partly with the help of bacteria in your own saliva. You are, in effect, using food to route around what age has taken away. A study from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden found that inorganic nitrate, at a level you might get from a decent bowl of spinach, improved skeletal muscle efficiency in older adults. And notice what that means. The muscle did not grow bigger. It simply became more efficient at using the oxygen and fuel already arriving, like tuning an old engine so it runs cleaner on the same petrol. Greens carry a second gift too, magnesium, which a great many older adults run short of, and magnesium is central to muscle relaxation. When your legs cramp at night, when a calf seizes up, that is very often a magnesium signal. A man wrote to me, 71, a retired postal worker from Ohio, describing legs that felt filled with concrete every single morning. He had taken magnesium tablets for years with limited joy. He switched approach and ate the greens themselves, cooked in olive oil, and some weeks later wrote to say the concrete feeling had gone, and he was walking his old mail route again, just for the pleasure of it. The olive oil in that story is not an accident, and it points us toward number 1, but hold that thought. The synergy tip here, always cook your greens in a quality fat, because it sharply increases how much of the fat-soluble goodness you actually absorb. And a small practical note on greens, because people ask, it does not have to be spinach, and it does not have to be raw. Kale, chard, rocket, spring greens, cooked or in a salad, They all bring the nitrate and most bring the magnesium. Frozen spinach counts, and it is cheap and it keeps, so there is no excuse about it going off in the drawer. A good handful most days is the sort of habit the research rewards, and it need not be joyless. Wilted in olive oil with a little garlic, it is one of the easier good things to actually enjoy eating. Right here, between number 4 and number 3, let me pause and ask something of you. If any of this has already shown you something you did not know, please tap the like button, because it genuinely tells YouTube to put this in front of more older folks who could use exactly this information. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. Every week I try to bring you the evidence-based version of this, built for people who intend to live stronger and longer and on their own terms. It takes a second, and it is the whole reason a channel like this can keep going. Now, back to the countdown. Number 3, Greek yogurt. And we are into the strong material now. Most people file yogurt under light snack, something you eat when you are trying to be good. What most people do not realize is that full-fat Greek yogurt is one of the more anabolically powerful foods available to an aging body, and it is dramatically underused as a muscle-building tool in later life. A single cup carries a serious amount of high-quality protein, and, importantly, it carries the branched-chain amino acids, leucine again among them, that muscle absorbs with real efficiency. Unlike many plant proteins, which are incomplete and need combining to be fully useful, the protein in Greek yogurt is what scientists call highly bioavailable. It does not take the scenic route, it goes more or less straight to where the muscle needs it. But here is the piece that lifts yogurt above a simple protein source for older adults. It carries live cultures, and those feed into a young and rather extraordinary field of research the scientists now call the gut-muscle axis. Work from the University of California, Davis found that healthier gut microbiome populations in older adults tracked directly with greater lean muscle, better leg strength, and faster recovery from exertion. The gut, it turns out, is not merely digesting your food. It has a say in how much of that food your muscles are actually able to use. And the trouble is that the gut community tends to grow less diverse and less efficient with age. Probiotic-rich foods like Greek yogurt help restock the shelves, like returning the lost books to a library so the body can find what it needs. Choose the plain, full-fat kind because the low-fat versions very often replace the fat with added sugar, which drives the very inflammation we spent number 5 trying to settle. The synergy tip: eat it within half an hour or so of any physical activity, even a short walk, because that is the window when the muscle is most receptive to the protein signal. Number 2, and I promised you early on that one of the top 2 would surprise you. This is the one. Beetroot. I can see some of you smiling and some of you skeptical, because beets are not the first thing that comes to mind when you picture strong legs. But the research on beetroot and physical performance in older adults is compelling enough that serious sports medicine programs now build beet-derived compounds into their recovery protocols. This is not folk medicine, it is frontier science pointed at the aging body. The mechanism is that same nitrate story from the greens, except beets carry it at roughly 3 to 4 times the concentration, gram for gram, of any leafy green. When that concentrated nitrate reaches the oxygen-starved environment of working muscle, it converts into nitric oxide with real efficiency, and the result is what researchers call a vasodilatory cascade, a wave of blood vessels opening that floods the legs with oxygen and nutrients in a way that aging vessels normally cannot manage on their own. And here is the part one find most interesting. A study at Wake Forest University found that older adults who consumed beetroot before moderate exercise showed increased blood flow to the regions of the brain tied to motor control. Read that again slowly. The beets did not only help what was happening in the legs, they improved the brain's ability to control the legs. For anyone worried about coordination, about falls, about that fraying communication between nerve and muscle, that is genuinely worth knowing. Beets carry one more thing too, a compound called betaine, which helps manage a blood marker called homocysteine, and elevated homocysteine, common in older adults, is associated with faster muscle loss and vascular damage. Someone wrote in about her mother, 68, from Oregon, walking with a cane after 3 separate doctors had told her the leg weakness and fatigue were simply part of aging. The family added a couple of roasted beets to her lunches 4 days a week and a short daily walk. Some weeks later, the daughter wrote that her mother had come back without the cane and was gardening again, and that she had wept, telling them, "One family's story, not a guarantee, but it fits the science well. The synergy tip: roast your beets rather than boiling them for a long time, because the water-soluble nitrates leach out into the cooking water, and pair them with a little citrus, because the vitamin C improves the conversion. And now, number 1, the food that has been demonized, avoided, and stripped out of millions of older diets on the strength of outdated advice, and that researchers at Harvard have taken a serious interest in as one of the more powerful muscle protective compounds available to people over 60. Extra virgin olive oil. I know some of you expected an exotic powder or a protein shake. Stay with me, because what the research says about olive oil and the aging muscular system genuinely reframes how you think about fat. Let us start with what makes it different from every other fat on the shelf. It contains a compound called oleocanthal, a natural polyphenol that behaves in the body remarkably like ibuprofen. It damps down the very same inflammatory enzymes that over-the-counter painkillers target, but without the stomach bleeding, the kidney strain, and the cardiovascular cost that come with leaning on those painkillers for years. And for older people, who are so often medicated for aching joints and muscles, that distinction matters a great deal. But the muscle-specific story goes further than inflammation. A study from the University of Athens followed older adults over 3 years and found that those consuming the most extra virgin olive oil had a markedly lower rate of sarcopenia, that age-related muscle loss, than those who rarely touched it. The proposed mechanism is the part the Harvard researchers found most compelling. The polyphenols in olive oil, and there are more than 30 distinct ones, appear to help switch on the mTOR pathway in muscle cells. The mTOR pathway is the master switch for muscle building, the same switch that leucine flips, that resistance exercise flips, that anabolic hormones flip. Olive oil polyphenols seem able to nudge that switch independently without requiring the exercise or the hormones, which is remarkable. And there is a mitochondrial dimension on top of that. A separate polyphenol found abundantly in olive oil, hydroxytyrosol, studied at the University of Jaén in Spain, appears to protect the mitochondrial DNA inside muscle cells from oxidative damage. Think of that DNA as a manuscript being photocopied over and over across a lifetime. Each copy gets a little fuzzier, the instructions a little more corrupted, until the muscle cell makes less energy and recovers more slowly. Hydroxytyrosol appears to slow that fraying of the copies. A man wrote to me, 81, a retired Navy commander from Virginia, who had avoided fat for 30 years on the guidelines of his era and could barely walk 2 blocks without stopping. He added good extra virgin olive oil to his eggs and his vegetables and changed nothing else at first. At 6 weeks, he wrote that he was walking 4 blocks without stopping. Months on, he sent a photograph from the finish line of a 2-mile charity walk for veterans. His story is his own, and I will not dress it up as proof. But it is a fine picture of what the research keeps pointing at. The synergy tip: buy your olive oil in dark glass, look for a harvest date and not just an expiry, and use it with the eggs and greens and fish already on this list, because the polyphenols degrade with light and time, and fresh oil carries far more of them. Here is the part worth carrying away, because it is the real lesson underneath all 6. These are not 6 separate tricks competing for your attention. They work as a single system, and the effect of combining them is greater than any one alone. The olive oil helps you absorb the fat-soluble goodness in the eggs and the greens. The protein in the eggs and the yogurt supplies the bricks. The nitrates in the greens and the beets open the roads to deliver those bricks. The omega-3s in the salmon calm the fire that would otherwise burn the muscle down. And the gut, fed by the yogurt, decides how much of all of it your body can actually use. Eaten together, and often, across weeks and months, that is how the research says you rebuild strength and steadiness in later life. And the most encouraging fact of all, the one the science is genuinely clear on, is that muscle tissue keeps its capacity for growth and repair well into the 9th decade. The body wants to rebuild. It is simply waiting for the raw materials, and for you to be consistent enough to matter. And let me say a word about how to actually put these 6 to work, because a list is only useful if it survives contact with a real week. You do not need to buy every one of these tomorrow, or overhaul your whole kitchen at once, which is how good intentions usually collapse. Pick one to start. Most people find eggs the easiest because they are cheap and quick and go with anything, so a couple of whole eggs cooked gently in olive oil is a fine first move that ticks 2 of the 6 at the same time. Add a bowl of greens to your dinner a few nights a week. Get oily fish onto the plate a couple of times a week. Keep beets and Greek yogurt in the house so they are there when you reach for something. And use good olive oil on all of it because it both carries its own benefit and helps you absorb the others. Build it up over a month, not a day, and it stops being a diet you are enduring and becomes simply how you eat, which is the only version that lasts long enough to change anything. You were not built to become a passenger in your own life, to hold the railing going down the stairs, to skip the family walk because you are unsure your legs will hold. A good deal of that is not written into your biology. It is the consequence of information nobody handed you in time. So if you are not subscribed, do that now, because each week I try to bring you exactly this, the evidence-based version that a 15-minute appointment never has room for. And tell me in the comments which of these 6 you will add first and how your legs have been treating you lately. That's what the evidence says. The rest is yours to decide. I'll see you next time.